When my master vanished one stormy night, I kept my mouth shut. By sunrise, I had a plan that would keep us safe and end his terror. You won't believe what I did next. Before watching this, subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Lila Merriweather, and I was born on red clay. Alabama heat sits heavy on your skin, and the air smells like wet earth and smoke. You learn to hear trouble long before it arrives. A gate squeak, a hard laugh, boots on the porch at midnight. He liked midnight. He liked fear. Folks called him Mr. Vaughn in the house, but outside, people said his temper traveled faster than his horse. Do you know a voice that makes your back stiff before it speaks? We did, and we watched the sky when he drank. That night the wind turned, pine tops hissed, and lantern wicks bent low. Cicadas quit their loud song like someone clapped a hand. I tasted metal in the air and counted my breath. Tempe Pratt, our midwife, pressed a finger to her lips. "Hush now," she whispered. "Storm knows names." Ansel Rucker, the gardener, stood by the cedar with a spade. He was quiet, like deep water, and his eyes never missed a seam in the soil. "Ground's soft," he said, and he looked at the parterre he had shaped by hand. "Roses don't lie. They tell on what you hide." Inside the house, Miss Dinah Vaughn poured tea and wrote letters in a careful hand. She had a spine like iron under lace. She watched bills and men with the same calm face. I saw her breathe slow and fold one page twice. She knew a debt when it knocked. The master's horse came back with foam on its mouth and no rider. The saddle hung crooked, and the reins dragged mud. I heard Tempe hum a child's tune, but her eyes were not soft. "He ain't on that road," she said. The wind pushed rain across the yard like sheets. No one cried out, not a soul. The storm did that part for us. Thunder rolled flat and mean, and the smell of roses climbed higher than the smokehouse. It was wrong for that month. Too strong. You ever smell sweetness and feel a warning at the same time? Morning light showed neat beds by the south wall, fresh mulch, bricks set straight like teeth, not the way Ansel left them last week. He touched the edge with his boot and did not smile. "Work done fast leaves a mark," he said. He drew a line in the damp. Overseer Caleb Pike walked the rows with his stick. He squinted at the trail like the trail would fear him. "He rode to Mobile," he said, loud enough for the breeze. But the travel trunk sat shut in the hall, and the good coat still hung dry on a peg. Miss Dinah asked for prayers and ordered breakfast, as usual. Eggs, corn cakes, black coffee. Calm is also a message, and she sent it with a steady plate. "We will respect the house," she said, and her eyes met mine. We set cups down without a shake. Our hands learned that long ago. Ansel checked tools in the shed. One spade missing. The best one. He ran his thumb along a new handle mark. Tempe laid green husks to dry in a strange small pattern near the cedar. Children thought it was play. It wasn't. Counting can look like a game when trouble listens. I moved slow and watched the hollow places. Soil settles different when it's been lifted and laid back. It sinks quiet. It breathes. The ground had a shallow sigh by the old cedar roots, where the rose scent hung thick. I swallowed and felt grit on my tongue. "Lila," Tempe said soft, "you keep your eyes and your peace." She tied her headscarf tight and added, "Storms wash tracks, but they don't wash truth." We spoke that way when ears we didn't invite leaned in. You ever talk plain but mean something deeper? It keeps folk alive. By noon the deputy rode in and wrote missing in his little book. He didn't look at the parterre. He looked at Miss Dinah's face. She looked back like a woman who had counted costs twice. "We'll manage," she told him. He tipped his hat and left footprints headed home. Caleb Pike whispered to a trader near the smokehouse. I heard the word "sell" float through the steam of salt pork. My stomach knotted. They think loss is just numbers on a page. We know loss has names and lullabies and empty chairs at supper. That's why we plan. I stood under the cedar and felt the bark rough against my palm. The sap smelled sharp and clean. The roses gave off a rich perfume that did not belong to that day. It curled into my nose and stayed. I closed my eyes and saw a map drawn in roots. What would you do if fear and hope pulled at you the same time? I chose to count. I chose to hold my tongue. I chose to remember where the earth sighed and where the bricks sat too perfect. And I chose to stand with Tempe and Ansel and Miss Dinah. Now listen close. The garden would keep our secret if we kept our promise. We would guard the children first, then the sick, then the quiet old ones who taught us songs. We would not hand our people to a stick and a ledger, not while we could still breathe. The wind fell. The heat came back. Work bells rang like nothing had changed, but everything had. A horse without a rider, a trunk that never moved, roses that bloomed like Sunday in the middle of a storm, and a spade no longer where it belonged. Do you smell the truth under the petals? I did, and I knew this. Justice can be quiet, and safety can be planned with songs, and the earth, when asked kindly, will hold what needs holding. That was the first day I felt the ground answer me back. Here's where things will get interesting. A ledger with missing pages will surface. A coat thread will snag on a thorn. A name will vanish from a bill of sale. And a garden map, made with beans and buttons, will show who walked where and why. You ready to see it? When the sun rises here, the light feels heavy and gold. The air holds heat even at dawn, and the ground smells like iron and rain. Alabama's Black Belt does that to you. It wraps you in rich soil and hard rules, and it teaches you to listen first. You hear riverboats far off before you see smoke. You hear mules tugging wagons and chains clinking at the gin. You hear a gate swing slow and then slam. And you learn which sounds mean work and which sounds mean hide. Have you ever read Danger with your ears? They call it the Black Belt for the dark earth and the bright cotton. The fields look like clouds fell to the ground when the bowls open wide, white on black, row on row, like someone drew lines with a ruler and never got tired. But people do get tired. Bodies do. By mid-morning, the cicadas scream like hot metal. The women tie cloth tight around their hair and necks. The men move in steady lines with hoes and talk under breath. Kids carry water and watch the sky for hawks. We measure our days by bells, whistles, and the path of the sun. The big house sits on a small rise with white columns and a long porch. It looks calm from the road, like a picture on a postcard that hasn't been invented yet. But a house can lie. The truth hangs near the smokehouse and the quarters. You can smell it with the salt and wood. Miss Dinah Vaughn keeps her lace clean and her accounts cleaner. She writes letters to merchants in Mobile and notes every promise. She is not kind, but she is not cruel, and that matters here. A steady hand can hold back worse hands. Do you know that kind of woman? Ansel Rucker lays brick like prayer and keeps roses alive in heat that kills mercy. He knows when to graft and when to cut back. He taught me to watch the bud union. If it sits too high, the plant suffers. If it sits too low, the plant lies. Roots tell truth to those who ask. Tempe Pratt carries a bag of jars and herbs and little-bellied bottles. She smells like mint and clove and sometimes smoke. People trust her more than the calendar because babies come when they come. She has a soft hum for good days and a sharp hum for bad ones. Overseer Caleb Pike wears a hat a size too big and a temper 2 sizes too small. He taps his stick on the porch rail like a clock that wants more minutes. He watches numbers and backs, and he likes both straight. He smiles when guests visit. He stops smiling when guests leave. The yard has rules you don't see unless you bend down. The brick paths turn in tight curves so you can't run fast. The well is set where the shadows never help you hide. The tool shed door squeaks unless you lift and pull at once. These are facts you learn with your hands. On Sundays, when the sky is kind, women tend the hidden patches near the fence. Mustard greens, okra, a bit of sage for coughs and grief. The men mend baskets and crack jokes low. Children clap games with odd counts that sound like play but carry news. Codes fit inside rhythm. At the river landing, boatmen share stories like they trade tobacco. A planter ruined by cards. A cotton price that fell like a stone. A sheriff who likes a show. News rides faster than any horse. When it wants to, but sometimes it walks and it still arrives on time. Late summer brings storms that stand up out of nowhere. Thunder presses the chest and makes talk stop. The smell changes first, like rusty water and crushed leaves. Wash hangs limp, dogs hide. Even the mules seem to pray, and the roses, if they are going to bloom, bloom too sweet. That week the Vaughn place felt off in small ways. A latch stuck that never stuck. A bell rang early and then late. A window blind hung crooked and stayed that way. The garden beds near the south wall looked too perfect. Ansel stared at them the way a man stares at a lie. Miss Dinah began writing after dark with one candle low. She tied letters with blue thread and sanded the ink slow. She asked me for boiled coffee at odd hours. Her jaw worked like she chewed back words. "We must be correct," she said. Correct can mean brave when laws are wrong. Caleb Pike counted heads twice a day and kept a list on a slate. He added the far field hands to the near count and still couldn't rest. He didn't trust quiet. He didn't trust roses either. "Flowers waste water," he muttered. Ansel pretended not to hear and kept his thumb on the soil. When the master still lived, he brought rose cuttings from a man in town who liked to brag. He wanted a parterre like folks in books had in France. He got something close because Ansel could make patterns with nothing but twine, sticks, and patience. Beauty cost somebody a back. The nights felt longer. The whippoorwills sang and then stopped at once. A lamp in the big house burned until near dawn. I could smell iron under the rose scent and taste dust at the back of my throat. My fingers kept counting without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, hush. I watched the quarters when the moon was thin. Clotheslines moved like snakes. A dog trotted and then lay down and didn't sleep. Tempe walked with a jar that glowed pale and knocked once at a door. The door opened fast and shut soft. Little things, important things. At market, a peddler spoke of a lawyer from Selma asking questions about deeds. Miss Dinah bought lamp oil and did not blink. She paid exact change and asked about weather upriver. Weather is a kind word for trouble when strangers lean in. She used it well. The morning the horse returned, the air felt like the inside of a chest. Breath was heavy. Chickens were quiet. The animal's eyes rolled white, and its sides heaved. Foam clung to the bit like soap. No rider, no dust trail from the road. Just that saddle and the leather creaking. What would you think first? Flight? Accident? Punishment? I thought of trunks and coats and letters and the way Miss Dinah had pressed her mouth into a line. I thought of the rose beds that looked too proud for the day. And I thought of the cedar, old and listening. We held to tasks because tasks hold you up. We hauled water. We pulled weeds. We made bread. We tied ribbons to make children laugh because a laugh can keep a secret safer than a sermon. And we watched the ground more than we watched the sky. The deputy came with dust on his boots and a book in his pocket. He wrote "missing" like that word could carry weight. He didn't step off the porch. He took coffee and rode away. His hat brim hid his eyes. He didn't smell the roses. Maybe he couldn't. Have you ever felt a place lean forward, waiting? The Vaughn place did that. The walls listened. The yard held its breath. The river kept its slow talk, but the sound turned thin. The garden looked back at us like a mirror, and the mirror did not like what it saw. I walked past the parterre and let my skirt brush the bricks. The line did not wobble. The mulch lay thick and even. No prints, no mess, too neat for wind and dark. Ansel's mouth tightened. Tempe's hum dropped low. Miss Dinah folded a handkerchief until it could not fold again. That was when I knew the setting itself would speak. The soil would witness. The roses would remember. The river would carry only part of the tale. And the rest would live here, in breath and rhythm and work, under rules made by men who never touched dirt with bare hands. Now let me tell you what happened next. A ledger lost pages without leaving torn edges. A coat thread caught where no coat should be. A trader heard the word sell, said soft like a sin. And a garden taught us how to map feet, with beans and buttons and courage. Ansel Rucker never raised his voice, but people listened anyway. He moved slow like a river, and he looked at dirt the way a doctor studies skin. He could tell you where a root slept and where a worm turned. Soil don't lie, he told me once. People do. He was tall and careful, with hands that kept a steady rhythm. Brick, tap, level, breathe. He taught boys to set a line and girls to graft a bud. He said both tasks required patience, and he was right. Have you ever watched a bud take because someone waited? Tempe Pratt held a life in each pocket, mint for breath, clove for tooth pain, a tiny bottle for fever you don't say out loud. She hummed when she walked, and her hum told you more than words. High meant ease, low meant trouble, silence meant pray. Miss Dinah Vaughn wore grief like lace, pretty to the eye, strong where it needed to be. She kept her letters in a blue tin and her plans behind the eyes. She spoke with care, like each word weighed a coin. People thought that meant softness. It did not. And me, I am Lila Merriweather. I keep lists in my head and trust in my feet. I was born to red clay, but my mind likes patterns. How many steps between the well and the cedar? How long a kettle takes when the wind turns east? Patterns keep you safe. We did not become a circle by accident. Work does that. Loss does that too. The night the horse came back alone, we did not hold a meeting. We did small things that fit together like hands. I looked at the ground. Ansel looked at the bricks. Tempe looked at faces. Roses smell. Wrong, Ansel said in a voice like gravel. He touched the mulch with his thumb. Set too fast. Heavy on top, light below. He didn't dig. He never dug when eyes watched. He just pressed and listened the way a carpenter listens to a board. Tempe wiped a child's nose and tapped a game rhythm. Clap, clap, pause, clap, clap, pause. Kids laughed and followed, and mothers smiled, but we counted. 3 beats marked the south wall. 2 beats marked the cedar. Hush and play, she said. Codes live in plain sight when danger stands near. Miss Dinah walked the porch with a book pressed to her chest. She asked Caleb Pike about feed and salt like it was any other day. We will need receipts, she told him, and her smile did not reach her eyes. Receipts have power when men think only fists do. Caleb chewed his thoughts like tough meat. Owner is absent, he said, like a test. Work must go on. He watched hands and backs. He also watched the garden, and his mouth pulled tight. He didn't like things he didn't control. That made him dangerous and sloppy at the same time. Ansel's notebook looked like a prayer book, but it held pressed leaves. He wrote in small letters. Madam Hardy here. T. Rose there. Then there were marks that meant more. A dot at the corner of a page, a short line under a Latin name. He was mapping without maps. Show me, I said. He closed the book and shook his head. Not yet. He looked at the cedar like it could argue back. Ground is listening. You ever feel a floor hold your secret? It feels warm and heavy, like a hand over a drum. Your heart keeps the beat. Tempe visited the big house on a call for Miss Dinah's headache. She brought willow bark and a cool cloth. When she came down, she whispered, "Trunk still shut. Coat still dry. Ledger changed places. Not pages. Places. A ledger moves when someone wants eyes to look somewhere else. We passed news in little bites." "Butter warmed too fast," I said by the smokehouse. That meant the kitchen clock ran slow. "Goat jumped the fence," a boy told Ansel. That meant the gate latch would not hold if pushed twice. All of it mattered, all of it tied together. At dusk, Ansel stood near the parterre and squinted at the brick curve. "Should dip here," he said, "but it rises." He laid a length of twine and pulled it tight. The line argued with the bed shape by a hair. A hair is enough. He nodded and tied a knot. Tempe found a thread on a thorn, fine, dark, and smooth. Not from a field coat, from a good riding coat. She rolled it on her finger and tucked it in her scarf. "Thorns tell too," she said. "They keep what they catch." She smiled without joy and kept walking. Miss Dinah asked me to bring coffee after night bell. I climbed the back steps quiet and set the tray on a small table. Her candle sat low in its brass cup, and her pen had ink on the nib. "We will be correct," she said. "Correct and steady." She looked tired and sure. Caleb tried to catch Ansel in a mistake. He told him to reset the south path by dawn. "So it drains," he said, pointing where the earth sighed. It was a trap to make Ansel dig with eyes on him. Ansel bowed his head and said, "Rain will ruin wet work." True and safe. After dark, we counted steps between the porch and the cedar. We counted breaths between thunder and lightning. We counted heartbeats between a watchdog's bark and the hush that followed. Counting takes fear and turns it into rope you can climb. Do you count when you're scared? Try it once. A peddler came by with pins and soap and a face full of stories. He said a man in town asked about deeds on the Vaughn place. He said the law likes paper more than bodies. Then he said the law likes quiet even more. He sold me a hair ribbon for luck. Next morning, Miss Dinah asked the deputy to witness a note. She spoke neat and slow. The note named her temporary steward in case of absence. That word held the day up like a beam. Absence can protect when the truth cannot be spoken yet. She knew where the lines were. Caleb cornered me by the well. "You see anything you shouldn't?" he asked, voice low and mean. I kept my face plain. "I see work." He tapped his stick on the stones. "You talk to me if you see tracks," he said. I nodded like a reed. Nods don't promise words. Ansel taught the boys how to carry bricks without scraping the edges. "Edges tell on you," he said. He made them practice till their pride softened. Pride breaks plans. Skill keeps them. He looked over at me and Tempe and gave the smallest nod you can give, and still mean it. We gathered under the cedar at noon with cornbread and a jug. Laughter rose and fell like wind. Beans and buttons came out of pockets like toys. But they were not toys. Buttons for walkers, beans for watchers, pedals for stops. The map grew on a quilt square between bites. A girl named Ruthie Sharp asked, "Miss Lila, is the master gone for good?" Her eyes were big and careful. I put a hand on her braids. "We don't say gone," I told her. "We say the house is quiet now." She nodded like she understood more than the words. Tempe tied the thread she found around a little twig and tucked it in her bag. "Evidence is a whisper," she said. "You have to lean close." Ansel wrote a tiny mark in his book and pressed a pale petal flat. He did not say which rose it came from. Miss Dinah sent for a preacher to pray peace over the yard. He prayed long and soft, and his eyes met mine once. He had river dust on his boots and news in his pocket. He asked God for rain, but not too much. We all said amen like we meant it. Caleb stood at the edge of the parterre and stared at the mulch. He bent and picked up a piece and rubbed it into dust. "Too fine," he muttered. "Night work." He turned fast like a man who heard his own thought and didn't like it. Fear makes bullies clumsy. I want you to feel what I felt then. The air had weight. The ground had memory. The people I loved had plans that lived inside work and songs. We were not strong because we shouted. We were strong because we agreed. Quiet, clear, together. By sundown, the circle was set. Ansel would watch the soil and bricks. Tempe would track lies and fevers in the same book. Miss Dinah would hold the paper line and keep Caleb busy with proper tasks. I would keep count and eyes, and I would carry news in plain sentences. Do you see the hands that knew before any man with a badge did? Hands that plant, heal, cook, copy, carry, and wait. Hands that fix what storms break and hide what danger hunts. Those hands saved us more than once. They would have to save us again. Now let me tell you what comes next. A ledger page will appear where it never sat. A spade will be missing, and the shed lock will tell on the thief. A magistrate will hear the word receiver, and our circle will bend but not break, and the roses will bloom too bright. Caleb Pike showed up at dawn with a list and a look. He tapped his stick and said the south bed needed a trench for drainage. He pointed straight at the cedar where the ground sighed. He wanted digging, not drainage. He wanted eyes on us and hands in the wrong place. Miss Dinah met him on the porch with cool coffee and a ledger. "Receipts first," she said. Her tone was butter over a blade. She asked for salt invoices and mule feed slips. She moved him sideways with paper while we moved forward with sense. "Do you handle trouble with paper too?" Ansel ran the twine along the parterre curve and tugged it tight. The line argued with the bricks by a finger's width. "Earth swells real," he said, "but brick lies neat." He pressed the mulch and listened. Sound came back dull in one place and hollow in another. He nodded once. Tempe laid husks to dry in a pattern that matched the hollow. 3 husks by the cedar, 2 by the wall, 1 near the path bend. A breeze could move a story, but not that one. Children hopped them like a game and learned a map without knowing. Mid-morning brought a peddler with needles and gossip. He said a lawyer asked in town about appointing a receiver for the Vaughn place. That word sat heavy. A receiver can sell for the estate's good. Goods can mean people. Miss Dinah bought thread and said, "We welcome proper process." Proper is a shield. In the tool shed, 1 spade slot stood empty, the best iron gone. The lock showed a new scratch like a cat had tried and failed, then tried again. Ansel rubbed the scrape and smelled oil. "Night work," he said. He checked each handle for fresh sweat. One still felt warm. The deputy returned near noon with dust and questions. "Owner's absent," he wrote. "Operations must continue." He looked at the gin, not the garden. He looked at Caleb, not at us. Miss Dinah asked him to witness a note. She would act as steward until the owner's return. He and us signed, careful and bored. Tempe stepped into the big house on a call for a kitchen burn. She set salve and eyes on the hall table. The ledger had moved. It sat 2 inches to the left, with a thread of sand on its spine like it had met the yard and come back. Pages looked the same. Places did not. I checked the travel trunk in the corner. Dust traced a clean rectangle where a smaller box had rested, now gone. The coat peg still held the good riding coat. I touched the sleeve and felt dry cloth. A storm coat should be damp. It was not. My mouth tasted like tin. We spread news in small bites. "The kitchen clock runs slow," I told Tempe by the pump. That meant Caleb's times could be bent. "Fig tree blights," Ansel told Caleb, pointing toward Pike's quarters. That pulled Caleb away to save his own fruit. He left the garden to men who knew better. By afternoon, Pike came back hot and sure. He filed a petition in town, he said. Court will set things right. He looked at me like I was a loose nail. Miss Dinah said, "Then the court will need a clean ledger." She smiled with her eyes closed. A dangerous smile. We set our own case with quiet pieces. Tempe wrapped the dark coat thread in paper and tucked it with her Bible. Ansel sketched a tiny map in his rose book, a dot for the hollow, a line for the false rise, a cross where the mulch smelled sweet in rain. I listed times, bells, boots, hums. Evening rain came straight and thin, the kind that leaves prints. We walked slow after chores like people who enjoy cool air. Water pooled along the brick where it should not. Near the cedar, the ground sank a hair. A worm cast rose up where a shovel had packed it hard. At supper, Caleb told the yard we might see changes soon. He said, for stability. And he smiled. Some smiles are knives. People lowered their eyes and kept chewing. Fear moves fast, but so does resolve. Resolve sat down that night and ate with us like family. Miss Dinah lit her candle and opened the ledger. She wrote numbers in the neat Vaughn hand the court liked. Then she slipped a copy of feed bills into a blue tin with a folded note for a magistrate. "We will be correct," she said again. "Correct can be a doorway you choose." Tempe hummed low and took a slow walk by the parterre. "Sweet for August," she said, sniffing the heavy bloom. "Too sweet." She tapped the brick with her knuckles and listened. She looked at me, then at Ansel. "Not yet," she whispered. Waiting is also a plan. Ansel left the shed door slightly off the latch and hung a wire. If a hand tugged wrong, the wire would fall and ring the wash basin. Simple traps save big plans. He set a bucket angled just so. A clumsy man would trip. A careful one would pause. We wanted the pause. The next morning, the magistrate's clerk came with a paper about receivership consideration. He looked tired and young. Miss Dinah offered tea and handed him our witness note. "Absent," she said, and "in need of stewardship as the law allows." Those were the words that hold a house up when storms beat it. Caleb fumed and waved a feed bill he couldn't explain. The numbers didn't match the month. He blamed the clerk at the store. He blamed rain. He blamed anything but the hand that wrote. The clerk's eyes flicked to Miss Dinah's neat columns and settled there. People trust neat when chaos shouts. By midday, our side had enough to stall him. A witnessed stewardship note, receipts aligned to the ounce, a tool log with a missing spade marked, a garden map no one but us could read. The court would need more, yes. But the first step held. Then came a slip we didn't plan. Caleb caught Ansel alone by the cedar and ordered the trench cut now. He pointed, hard and eager. Ansel looked up at the sky, at clouds stacking like worry. "Rain's coming heavy," he said. "Cut now and we flood the beds." It was true and useful. Caleb sneered. "Do it anyway." Ansel only nodded and walked to the shed, slow as Sunday. He counted to 10 and waited for thunder. When it rolled, he dropped the wash basin on the wire. The clang sounded like the sky had cracked. Hands poured out of cabins and the porch to see. Miss Dinah stood with a parasol she did not open. "Mr. Pike," she called steady, "no digging near the cedar until the court has reviewed." She said "court" like a bell. He froze. Rain began, heavy and sure. The trench would have made a river. He knew it. He swallowed his order. We let the storm do its work. Water showed every low flaw and every high lie. The parterre held too well where it should have eased. Near the cedar the ground took water and sighed again. A little pool formed where no pool had lived last month. The rose scent climbed, sweet as a secret. I want you to see the pieces now. A missing spade, a moved ledger, a dry coat in a wet week, a petition to sell under order, a garden that argued with its own shape, and people who counted, hummed, copied, and stood when the stick demanded, "We kneel." Caleb stopped to the porch and threw his hat down. He said words the Bible doesn't like and promised sales by Saturday. Miss Dinah folded her parasol and said, "Not without signatures you do not have." Then she turned and went inside to sharpen her pencil. That is how walls get built. Night came soft after the storm passed. The moon pulled itself through thin cloud and watched us breathe. Tempe set her jars in a row and touched the paper-wrapped thread. Ansel closed his rose book and set a small stone on top. I sat on the step and counted to 100 twice. What would you do with a secret the earth holds? Would you run your mouth, or would you guard it with work and law? We chose work and law. We chose to lead Caleb into a room where truth hangs on the wall and men must sit to hear it. We chose time. Here's what happens next. A judge will see numbers that don't add up. A cousin's evaluation will fall apart under a real doctor's questions. A sealed packet will slide across a desk and make a man clear his throat. And a single glove will rise from wet soil like a warning. Caleb Pike brought 2 men and a shovel list at sunrise. He said the south bed needed a trench today, and his eyes went straight to the cedar. He wanted to cut more than soil. He wanted to force our hands and make a show. But shows can be turned into proof if you are patient. Miss Dinah stepped onto the porch with a ledger and a letter. She spoke in that even tone that makes fools slow down. "Before any digging," she said, "we will have receipts and a witness." She asked for mule feed slips, salt invoices, and tool inventories. Paper can hold a door shut when anger tries to kick it in. Ansel pulled twine tight along the parterre curve and listened with his fingers. The line argued with the brick by a finger's width. He pressed the mulch with his thumb and heard dull here, hollow there. "Night work," he said. He didn't dig, he marked. Work done, honest sounds the same everywhere. Tempe placed husks to dry in a rhythm only we read. 3 by the cedar, 2 at the wall, 1 at the bend. Children hopped the pattern and laughed, and we watched where their heels sank. A map can look like a game if danger likes to watch. News came by peddler with pins and a sly mouth. A lawyer in town had asked about appointing a receiver. That word can steal a house in daylight. A receiver can sell to protect the estate. Goods can mean people if no one objects. Miss Dinah smiled like a schoolmarm. "We welcome proper process," she said. "Proper is armor. We checked the shed, 1 spade missing, the iron one with the clean edge." The lock had a fresh scratch. Ansel touched the scar and smelled oil. "Tried twice," he muttered. He lifted handles and felt for warmth. One was not cool yet. Night had left its breath. The deputy came back with dust on his cuffs and a small book. "Owner absent," he wrote, and kept his boots on the porch. He looked at the gin, not the garden. He took coffee, signed Miss Dinah's stewardship note, and left as if mornings don't lie. We kept the signed line like a coin. Tempe tended a kitchen burn and let her eyes do more. The household ledger had moved a little to the left. A thin sand smear along its spine told on a yard visit. The pages looked the same. The places did not. She wrapped the dark coat thread she'd found in paper and tucked it deep. I checked the hall trunk. A dust shadow marked a missing small box. The good riding coat still hung dry in a week of rain. I tasted metal and counted to 10. If a man rode to Mobile, his coat rode with him. If his coat stayed dry, his story did not. By noon, Caleb returned with a petition and a grin. "Court will hand me keys by Saturday," he said. He enjoyed the taste of the words. Miss Dinah set the ledger on the rail and tapped its neat columns. "Then the court will want numbers." "That ad," she replied. Calm can sound like thunder when you stand on it. Ansel angled a wash basin on a wire inside the shed and eased the door. If a heavy hand pulled wrong, the basin would fall. Simple tricks make loud warnings. He showed me the angle and the nail. "We need witnesses," he said. "Even fast men pause at a sudden clang." Storm clouds stacked and made a ceiling of slate. Caleb shoved a finger at the cedar and barked, "Cut now." It was a trap. If Ansel dug, we'd be seen as meddlers. If he refused, we'd be called defiant. He looked up at the sky and gave the weather its due. "Heavy rain," he said. "Fresh cut will flood and rot your beds." True and useful. Caleb sneered. "Do it anyway." Ansel walked slow to the shed and let the basin drop as thunder rolled. The clang rang across the yard like a church bell. Doors opened. Eyes watched. Miss Dinah stepped forward with her parasol closed. "No digging," she said, "until the magistrate reviews." She used the word that turns tempers into paper. Magistrate. Rain came hard and honest. Water traced every lie in brick and mulch. It ran smooth where Ansel's line knew it should. It stalled where the bed was built too proud. Near the cedar, the ground sighed and made a shallow pool. The rose scent rose with the steam, sweet enough to sting. After the rain, the magistrate's clerk arrived, wet and young. He carried a notice about receivership consideration. His pen hovered when Miss Dinah presented the signed stewardship note and a packet of clean receipts. Feed matched to dates, salt to head count, mule shoes to miles, numbers like bricks, square and snug. He nodded and took them like a man glad to hold something solid. Tempe added a sworn line for the packet. She testified to time and tending, not to names. "Beds were altered the night of the storm," she wrote, "for reasons unknown." Not a lie, not the whole. The truth can be carried in small cups if heavy truth would drown you. Caleb tried to push anyway. He waved a bill with figures that didn't match the month. He blamed the store. He blamed the rain. He blamed confusion in the house. The clerk glanced at Miss Dinah's columns, then at the wet yard. He said the magistrate would hear both sides tomorrow. Tomorrow is a rope if you know how to hold it. We spent the evening setting our case where eyes could not steal it. Ansel sketched the parterre curve to scale in his rose book and pressed a petal from the early bourbon bloom. Tempe logged the moved ledger in her lie book with the hour and the inch. I wrote bells, boots, knocks, and a whistle I didn't like at dusk. Miss Dinah sealed a blue tin with wax. Night settled and let the ground finish its talk. A thin line of silt curled where the hollow lay. A glove finger peeked from the mulch like it wanted light. Not a whole glove, just a tip, stitched fine. Tempe touched my sleeve and shook her head. "Not yet," she whispered. "Let the court ask." Morning brought a traveling preacher with an amen on his lips and a note in his palm. He blessed the house and the hands, and then passed Miss Dinah a folded scrap. "Receiver rumored friendly to certain buyers," it read. She thanked him with coffee and a quiet look that promised memory. At the hearing, the room smelled like wet wool and duty. Caleb spoke first, loud and sure. "Owner absent. Operations at risk. I require authority to prevent loss." He did not say what he meant to sell. He didn't need to. The heir knew. The clerk knew. So did the rain in our sleeves. Miss Dinah stood with her ledger and her note. "Owner absent," she agreed, "and stewardship in place." She laid out receipts that matched, a tool list with a missing spade marked, and the sworn line about night alterations. She did not accuse. She offered weight. Judges lift weight before they lift voices. The magistrate rubbed his temple and looked out at the gray day. "Temporary stewardship remains," he said. "No trenching, no sales, no changes pending review." Caleb swallowed his next word like it burned. The room breathed again. Quiet victories leave the deepest marks. Back at the yard, Ansel tied new knots in his twine and reset stakes no one else noticed. Tempe wrapped the glove tip in paper and wrote the hour. I stood under the cedar and listened to drops fall from needles. Each drop found earth like it knew the way. That's how truth moves when you clear a path. Do you see the shape now? A list becomes a wall, a twine line becomes a compass, a hum becomes a code, a clean ledger becomes a shield, and a rosebed becomes a witness that doesn't shout but refuses to forget. That is how we began to win. Here's where things get tighter. Pike will try to force a sale through a friend. A cousin's expert opinion will crack under real questions. A merchant will arrive with a bill no one can pay without showing the forged page. And the garden will give up more than a glove. Ansel said a spade can tell on a man without saying a word. The edge keeps memory. A clean face cuts true. A dirty face lies and leaves crumbs. He wiped the handle of the spare and felt for oil. Hands talk, he said. Wood listens. We set a plan that looked like chores. Miss Dinah would hold the paper gate. Tempe would carry jars and gather whispers. I would count bells and boots. Ansel would measure soil with string and patience. Nothing loud, nothing fast. Have you ever fought a storm with small knots? At midday, Miss Dinah asked for a quilting circle by the cedar. Women brought scraps and stories. Laughter rose and fell like wind. While needles moved, Tempe laid 3 kernels by the hollow and 2 by the wall. Children hopped them and learned the map as a game. Maps hide best in joy. Ansel reset bricks 2 at a time along the curve. Settling, he said to Caleb when asked. He tapped each brick with a knuckle. A true set makes a small ring. A false set makes a small thud. He listened for rings, marked the thuds with a thumb, and never reached for a shovel. Caleb circled and sniffed. Flowers waste time, he muttered. But he watched Ansel like a cat watches a bird. He wanted a slip, a wrong reach, a nervous dig. Ansel didn't give it. He moved slow as Sunday and as sure as noon. Slow breaks a bully's teeth. The peddler came late with wire and pins and a warning. Receiver's friend is sniffing, he said. He buys cheap, sells dear, and doesn't mind who's counted as goods. Miss Dinah nodded once. We'll welcome review, she said, with ledgers that add. She paid exact and wrote down the price. Tempe met the traveling preacher by the well and handed him a small jar of salve. He handed back a folded note. Tomorrow's docket is crowded, it read, but your line is on it. She tucked it in her sleeve and smiled at his amen. Church voices carry truth wrapped in sound. That evening I checked the shed at dusk and saw dust where a box had been. The missing spade, the oil smell, the fresh scratch. Pieces fit like a grim puzzle. I felt the prick of fear and let it pass. Then I counted to 30 and went to light the kitchen lamps. Night laid down heavy. We moved in our usual ways. Tempe hummed low along the parterre and paused at the hollow. Ansel stretched twine from stake to stake and tied a knot at a new dip. I sat near the step with mending and watched the shed door from the corner of my eye. A shadow slid by the shed and lifted the latch wrong. The wash basin clanged hard on the wire. Bodies filled doorways like rain fills ruts. Caleb spun, mask off for a breath, and then barked, "Who left that there?" Miss Dinah stepped out with her parasol closed. "We keep order," she said. "We do not sneak." Caleb hissed like a hot iron in cold water. "We dig at dawn," he said. "Court or no court." His jaw worked. He didn't like eyes. He liked orders that landed flat and unchallenged. Eyes are sand under a bully's boot. They make him slip. Morning brought a sky like wet slate and air like a held breath. The magistrate's clerk arrived damp and serious. He took Miss Dinah's tin and wrote down the time. "No changes," he said, reading the note. "No sales." No trenching pending review. Words can be stones if you stack them right. Caleb swore under his breath and marched to the parterre. He jammed his stick into the mulch and pried up a neat square. Ansel stepped forward without hurry. "Rot the roots," he said. "You break the beds back." Caleb sneered. "I fix what you hide." He lifted the mulch. We watched and waited. Under the top layer, the soil ran wrong. It looked cake-sliced, not crumble-loose. Water pooled where it should have moved. Caleb frowned at his own mess. Then he stabbed deeper and came up with a glove tip, stitched fine. He froze for less than a breath. Tempe did not move. Miss Dinah did not blink. The clerk saw it. He saw the spade gouge, the glove tip, the cut edge. He cleared his throat and wrote a line. "Ground altered," he said. "Court to order formal inquiry." Caleb set his jaw, tossed the glove piece aside, and said, "Old trash." The clerk walked to pick it up and tucked it in his book. We did not look at each other. We looked at the ground. Ansel knelt and pressed his palm flat. "Let the rain speak again," he said. "Not men." The clerk nodded like a man who wanted less talking and more steady things. "Tomorrow," he said. "Here." That afternoon, Caleb tried another road. He sent a runner to a trader with a message. "Buyers meet at dusk." Private. The boy told the wrong ear. The preacher brought the news with another amen. Miss Dinah wrote a short, sharp letter to the magistrate. "Sale under petition is contempt," she wrote. "Paper can pull a rope tight." Tempe checked the kitchen, the pump, the porch, the path. She saw Brooke Wallace, Caleb's cousin, with a doctor's bag and a nervous hat. "Evaluation," Brooke tried to say, as if the word were a key. Tempe handed her a peppermint and asked 3 simple questions. Brooke failed all 3 and left with her cheeks hot. We took turns by the cedar at dusk, quiet and ordinary. I mended. Tempe shelled peas. Ansel whittled a peg and tossed curls of wood to the damp. The roses breathed that thick sweet again. A whippoorwill called twice and then held its tongue. Some silences ring. By lantern light, we laid out buttons and beans on a quilt square. Buttons for men who watch, beans for men who move, petals for stops. We drew a line for the path the clerk's boots took, and a cross where Caleb's stick bit the soil. The map was a language no court could steal. Tempe opened her lie book and wrote, "Glove tip lifted by Pike." Clerk witnessed, "Rain dew." She dated it. She underlined once. She folded the page corner, then she shut the book and put both hands on top like prayer. Soft hands can hold a hard line. Miss Dinah checked the blue tin seal and tied the key string around her wrist twice. "We will be correct," she said again, and now the words felt like a wall we built together. Correct did not mean weak. It meant chosen. It meant we would not be chased into a corner and made to bark. Thunder rolled low like a cart over planks. The air smelled like iron and roses again. "Not yet," Ansel whispered to the ground. "Soon." He set the spare spade in the shed with the edge away from the door. A spade can be a tool or a story, depending on who holds it. Have you ever stood still so truth could rise on its own? It feels like holding your breath under water and trusting your lungs will forgive you. We stood, we held, we trusted the rain, the clerk, the paper, and the garden that had learned to keep faith with the living. Here's where the rope tightens. The inquiry will bring questions we can answer, and a few we won't. Caleb will try a night move and trip his own wire. A merchant's bill will force the forged page into light, and the earth will show more than a glove. It will show a shape no lie can lift. Under the cedar, oaths feel heavier than words. The bark is rough and the sap smells sharp. We stood in a small circle and kept our voices low. Storms pass, but promises stay. Children first, Tempe said. Truth next, Miss Dinah added. Ansel touched the soil and nodded. No gallows, I said. We agreed. The inquiry day came wet and gray. The room smelled like wool and old wood. The magistrate read slow. Caleb Pike spoke fast. Owner absent. Operations at risk. Appoint a receiver. He did not say sail, but the word stood beside him like a shadow. Do you hear words people don't speak? Miss Dinah stepped forward with calm like iron under silk. She laid out receipts that matched down to salt and shoe nails. She presented the witnessed note, naming her steward. She mentioned alterations to the garden observed after the storm. She did not accuse. She carried weight and set it down. The clerk produced the glove tip Caleb had lifted. He placed it on a sheet and wrote a line. Ground altered, he said. Evidence secured. Caleb's jaw jumped. A glove is not a body, he barked. The magistrate raised a hand. No trenching, he repeated. No sales. Status kept pending review outside. Caleb cornered Ansel by the gin house. You hide bones and roses, he hissed. Ansel looked at his hands. I bury roots, he said. They feed the living. The yard crew drifted near without a word. Work sounds kept going. That is how a man learns he is alone. Tempe walked with Brooke Wallace again, the evaluator with a borrowed bag. What does pupil equal test? Tempe asked. Brooke blinked. What? Tempe smiled. You aren't a doctor. Brooke's ears burned. She fled to Caleb, who cursed quiet. Lies crumble when simple questions stand in front of them. A merchant from town arrived with a thick bill. Mule shoes, seed, canvas, and a date that bent truth. Who signed this? The magistrate asked. Caleb said, Vaughn. Miss Dinah lifted a copy with the true line and neat hand. The two did not match. The room heard the rip even before the page tore. Our circle met under the cedar that night. Rain dripped from needles, marking time. We spoke the plan in small pieces, so the wind could not carry all of it. Miss Dinah would press for a bond that made her stewardship firm. Tempe would keep the lie book ready for the clerk's eye. Ansel would set a line of pegs that measured any new sink by morning. I would watch the shed and the path and count the silent places. We swore quiet oaths, not on a Bible, on work. I will not dig where digging harms, Ansel said. I will not sell what breathes, Miss Dinah said. I will not forget, Tempe said. I will not speak what condemns the living, I said. The cedar held those words, the way the ground holds water after rain. Caleb tried a night sail anyway. A trader slipped through the side gate with a face like a closed fist. He carried a paper with lines too neat. The preacher happened by with a psalm and a cough. He coughed twice, our sign. Miss Dinah stepped into the yard in her shawl and asked the trader for his license. He had none. The magistrate's clerk arrived on the preacher's heels. Contempt, he said. Caleb swallowed his next breath. The magistrate called us back the next day. He read 3 things into the record: forged entry suspected, improper sale attempt, ground alteration pending inquiry. Stewardship remains, he said. He set a bond. He told Caleb to maintain order and to touch nothing not on his list. He sounded tired of the smell of wet lies. After, a woman from a neighboring place came quiet to Tempe. Heard you keep notes, she said. My sister has marks that match a counting stick. Tempe took her hand and wrote a date and a name. Bring her when the clerk returns, she said. Justice grows when one brave woman tells another the door is open. Ansel showed the boys how to set pegs that tell on the night. Peg at dusk, peg at dawn, he said. Measure the fall. He taught them to listen to the ground the way a man listens to a friend who is afraid. The boys nodded and stood a little taller. Skill is an oath, too. I checked the shed latch and the wash basin wire and the bucket angle. The small traps had done their job. Caleb had learned we watched. Men who rely on fear do not like being seen. They call it insolence. We call it eyesight. Eyes can be a wall. That evening we ate cornbread and beans under a sky that felt less heavy. Laughter came easier, but not loud. We do not tempt storms. We respect them. Miss Dinah read 2 letters by lamplight. One to the magistrate, thanking him for order. One to a merchant, canceling a shady account. Her pen did not shake. Tempe wrapped the glove tip again and laid it by her Bible. "We do not need to say what we know," she told me. "We need to prove what they can't deny." She patted my hand. "Proof climbs stairs slow, but it gets to the top." Do you believe that? I do. Caleb stood by the parterre at dusk and stared at the mulch like it owed him truth. He wanted the ground to shout his version. It would not. It held its line and its scent and its sigh. He threw his hat and missed the path. Small misses grow large when a man is angry. Night fell with a coolness we hadn't felt all week. The roses breathed less sweet and more clean. The cedar gave off that sharp sap, like it was glad. We sat close enough to hear each other's breath and far enough that a listener would catch only wind. Now we were ready for the next turn. We had a steward's bond, a clerk who saw, a preacher who listened, a traitor who fled, and a bully who learned the sound of his own echo. Under the cedar, we set our hands in and said together, "Hold." Here's what waits for us. A rain that tells more than we want it to. A court that orders a careful look where we have not dug. A friend who becomes a witness. And a garden that gives up not the how, but enough of the where, to end the threat and hold the line. Rain came before dawn and spoke for us. It tapped the parterre soft, then hard, then steady. Water traced every lie and found the low places. The cedar drank slow. The ground sighed like a tired chest. I stood with my shawl tight and let the smell of roses rise. The clerk arrived with 2 men and careful boots. He did not look at faces first. He looked at the soil. "No spades," he said, "only rods." He tapped the dowels against his palm and nodded to Ansel. "You showed good sense," he added, almost soft. "Sense can win a room before words do." Caleb Pike hovered like a storm that missed its mark. He tried to stand close to the clerk and talk fast. The clerk stepped away and read the order. Discreet inquiry. No disturbance more than needed. Witnesses present. Miss Dinah said, "We are present," and her voice landed like a nail in good wood. Ansel took 1 rod and set the measure. He pressed down slow at the bed's edge. Firm, he moved to the false rise. Softer, he moved by the cedar root, softest. The rod sank a finger deeper than honest ground would allow. He did not look at me. He did not need to. Tempe watched the clerk write and kept her hum low. Low meant steady. She held her bag and a small paper-wrapped thing, the glove tip. When the clerk asked, she handed it over without speech. He placed it in a folded sheet and marked the time. Paper remembers when men forget. "Here," the clerk said. He knelt and brushed soil with his hand. He did not dig. He cleared, patient as rain. Mulch peeled back like a blanket. The scent rose too sweet for the hour. He paused and closed his eyes to listen. Then he looked at the cedar and the sky and nodded. A corner of leather showed, dark and fine. Not a full glove, not a shoe, a slice of something that belonged to a man who never came home. The clerk did not say the word. He lifted his hand, and the men stepped back. "Enough," he said. "Record it. Seal the bed. Note the smell, the depth, the layer." Caleb barked, "Trash." His voice cracked on the second letter. The clerk did not look up. "You will maintain order," he said, "and you will make no sales." Caleb swallowed like the word cut. He looked at the garden like it betrayed him. Gardens don't betray. They refuse to lie. Miss Dinah signed the note for the record with a calm hand. Stewardship remains under bond, the clerk read. Further review in 3 days. She thanked him as if he had brought flour. Courtesy makes sharp things safe to carry. He tipped his hat and left the rods with Ansel. When they were gone, we stood quiet. The rain eased to mist. The roses breathed lighter, like they had done a job and could rest. Tempe took my hand and squeezed once. "Hold," she said. I said, "Hold," back. Small words can carry heavy loads. By evening, word had traveled the way word does. The trader did not return. The preacher sent a psalm and a loaf. A woman from the next place came with her sister, face bruised where a stick keeps time. Tempe wrote her name in the lie book and the sickness book both, and she sat them by the Bible like 3 sisters. Caleb packed a trunk in anger and didn't leave. Anger makes a circle if it has nowhere to go. He counted heads twice and still found only shame. He kicked a bucket and missed. He stared at the cedar like it spoke. The cedar said nothing. Trees don't argue. They stand. Miss Dinah wrote 2 more letters, one to a judge, thanking him for proper restraint, one to a merchant, ending credit that stank of favors. Her blue key string never left her wrist. "We will be correct," she said again, now like a prayer of thanks. Correct kept people breathing. Ansel reset the twine line and pressed each brick until the ring came true. He smoothed the mulch back over the marked place with a flat palm. "Rest now," he told the bed. He talked to ground the way some men talk to babies, soft, sure, and with love that expects growth. I checked the shed latch and the wash basin wire one last time. I moved the bucket a finger's width to make the steps safe for old feet. I set a cup by the well for the clerk if he returned. Small kindness makes a hard day end better. It also keeps your hands steady. Night fell clear. Stars came out like nails in black cloth. The air cooled and lost the iron taste. The roses smelled clean again, not thick. The cedar sap held sharp and brave. We sat near, not close, and breathed in time. Even our breaths felt like they belonged to the same room. Do you feel the release with me? Not victory yet, not peace. The part in between, where you know the worst hand won't close on your neck tonight. Gratitude tastes like cornbread then. Simple, warm, enough. We ate and nodded and did not talk about what the ground had kept. In 3 days the court would write the next lines. We did not need to hurry them. We had done our part. No digging, no shouting, no names thrown like stones, just rods, notes, receipts, and the truth the water carried up for those willing to see. I lay down and slept without counting. That is its own kind of freedom, the kind you don't brag about because it might spook. Morning would bring chores and questions. We would answer the ones that save lives and leave the rest for God and soil. Here's where we go next. The court will decide the house's future and send Caleb away. The steward's bond will harden into title and rule. The garden will be replanted with names that honor the living. And the story will end the way the roses asked us to end it, quiet, correct, and free of fear. The garden taught us how to end a story without cruelty. The court wrote the lines we needed. Stewardship stayed with Miss Dinah under bond. Caleb Pike was dismissed for cause and told to leave by sundown. The paper felt light in our hands and heavy in our chests. Relief can weigh more than fear when it finally lands. There was no parade, no speeches, just order. The clerk signed the last sheet and nodded to Ansel. "Keep the beds true," he said. He nodded to Tempe. "Bring your books if harm returns." He nodded to me. "Keep counting." Simple charges, strong ones. We said yes with quiet mouths. Miss Dinah sold nothing that breathed. She settled the honest bills and closed the crooked ones. She placed the company share papers in a locked drawer and tied the key on her wrist. "We will be correct," she said, and now it sounded like a blessing. Correct kept children at home and women at their work with heads high. Ansel replanted the south parterre with cuttings named for the living, not for men who bought names. Tempe chose the varieties: Hope Rose, Mercy Blush, Ruth's Dawn for little Ruthie Sharp. No grand titles, just the truth we wanted to grow. "Let the beds remember the right things," Ansel said, hands deep in loam. We kept one space bare by the cedar, not a grave, a promise. No marker, just clean earth and a circle of bricks set a hair lower, so rain would gather and then sink. When we passed, we touched our fingers to our palms and then to the air, a sign to each other. We keep. The preacher came on Sunday with a psalm that felt like cool water. He thanked God for order and for the work of hands. He did not name what the ground had kept. He didn't need to. The cedar whispered sap, and the roses answered soft. Some truths don't want a shout. They want a garden. Caleb left like a man who forgot which way the road turned. He took his stick and his hat and nothing else. His echo stayed a day, maybe two, and then the yard swallowed it like a rain puddle drinks a footprint. Absence can be a mercy when presence was a knife. Neighbors asked questions with soft edges. Heard the court stepped in. Heard Miss Dinah keeps a tidy house. We nodded the way you nod at weather. Storm passed, we said. Work to do. Stories can be closed with fences and rose hedges if you plant them thick and tend them well. Miss Dinah set aside coin each month for a school day on the porch, letters and numbers for little ones and big ones who never got the chance. She asked Tempe to teach measures and herbs. She asked Ansel to teach lines and levels. She asked me to teach the counting that saves. We said yes. I want you to hear this part in your bones. Justice came quiet. It came with rods, not blades, with receipts, not rumors, with songs that counted and gardens that remembered. It did not kiss every hurt. It did not bring back what wagons took, but it drew a line, and it held. Years later, a woman with a notebook walked our paths and asked polite questions. She said the place felt peaceful and brave at once. She asked why the South. Bed curved different. I said, rain taught us to build it that way. She smiled and wrote, and the roses breathed like they agreed. Children now run the brick paths and don't fear the curve. They learn names that honor hands, not masters. They carry water and don't look over their shoulders for a stick. They clap games for joy, not for codes. And still, when storms roll, we listen. We always will. Do you see what the roses taught? Memory can grow without blood. Truth can root in work. Safety can bloom in order. And a house that once took can learn to keep. Not by forgetting, but by tending. By planting names worth saying. By letting the earth hold what it must and releasing the rest to time. I still touch the cedar when I pass. I still breathe the sharp sap and say, hold. The ground answers in the way only ground does. It holds. It forgives what it can. It refuses what it must. And it asks for water, sunlight, and care, the same things people need when they have been through a storm. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.